morning on Media and Society. We're discussing how women in politics and positions of power are reported on by the media. Well, hello and welcome to Media and Society. I'm your host, Naledi Mulewa. Always a pleasure having you on the show with us. And of course, this is really the show where we take a look at the intersection between the media and society. And as usual, the show is not complete without your input. So feel free to give us a call over the next hour on the number 011-714-0661 or 0662. Or why don't you get onto Twitter and get in touch with us using the hashtag SABC Media Society or at SABC_MNS. Well, before we get into the discussion for this morning, we thought let's take you to the future of media practitioners, right? We spoke to young students from the University of Johannesburg to hear their views of how they see the media and how it reports on women in powerful positions.
I think the portrayal of women in politics has been problematic and still is problematic in our society, especially in the South African society, because women are held accountable at a higher standard in comparison to their male counterparts.
I think female politicians are represented unfairly in the media. They mainly use stereotypes when referencing to women. They use their femininity. They're also seen as weak and undecisive.
Women they're misrepresented, especially in the South African and African diaspora, especially when it comes to politics. Let's first focus on the ANC. There's only 3 women in the whole top 6. That means it's a problem when it comes to representation. Women are not trusted enough with the highest seats in parliament.
So you can't speak about the portrayal of women in the media without looking at the history. So women were previously marginalized, excluded, dominated and suppressed. And right now, the media plays a critical role because it has transformed how women are portrayed and how they're seen by the public. If you look at the media mostly, there's always those subtle languages that portray women in a sexist manner or in a way that they're incapable. So the narrative has to change and it has to show that women are capable of leading.
So personally, I think we can do a better job in how, as a media, we represent and portray women who are in politics, because obviously young women who are in school, young women who are aspiring to be in politics as well, are looking to see positive influences, are looking to see positive representations of women in politics, and I also think that. The representation of Gugu Dlamini when they were choosing who was going to represent, who was going to lead rather the ANC, it was as if the questioning of qualifications and the questioning of whether she was suitable for the job gave an impression that perhaps women are always going to be they're always going to be proving whether they deserve to be in certain spaces.
Right, so let's get into our discussion for the hour, and we've got some very interesting guests to take this conversation with us as we enter the hour. We are, of course, going to be kicking off for Women's Month, and we thought let's have a discussion around just how the media actually portrays women who are in powerful positions. In the modern day era, women have made significant strides in breaking so many barriers and ascending to prominent leadership roles across various fields, including politics, business and governance. However, a critical aspect that demands attention is how these women in positions of power are portrayed by the storytellers of our nation, the media, when their accomplishments and decisions become the subject of public discourse, right? The media's representation of women in leadership roles plays, of course, a very important role in shaping how these women are viewed by the public. This topic delves into the complexities of a media portrayal, shedding light on potential gender biases, stereotypes, and the overall impact on women's experiences as they navigate the multifaceted landscape of leadership. So we are joined in studio this morning by the one and only Ms. Mbali Ntuli, who's the CEO and founder of Groundwork Collective, former DA member. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
An absolute pleasure having you with us. We have Yolokazi Mfuto, who is a political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. We're joined via Zoom by Nomshado Nkosinkulu, who is the head of communications at Media Monitoring Africa. Nomshado, a good morning to you, and thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you. Morning to everyone.
Yeah, I've got some powerful women on the show this morning. Really looking forward to it. Also joining us is Gugu Dlamini from the ATM's Women's League and Nonhlanhla Makhuba from the IFP Women's Brigade. Ladies, thank you so much for giving us your time. Looking forward to the discussion. I'm going to start here in studio, though, before we bring in some of our guests that are joining us digitally. And Mbali, I think it's only natural that we'd start with you because you've had, I suppose, what one could call a full circle political career already at quite a young age, where you've gone into the role of consultancy. Talk to us firstly about where you are right now.
Right now, I run an organization called the Groundwork Collective, and it's really about getting back into communities and doing a lot of work. We've recently launched and had a successful pilot of a registration campaign where we were able to register about close to 10,000 people within 20 days. And this is important for us given the state of our democracy, the declining amount of young people on the voters' roll, and the idea and the knowledge, particularly for myself from politics, that the only way to change things is to actually flood those numbers. So we're doing a lot of different types of interesting work.
Yeah, I find it interesting, this move that we're seeing from a lot of young political leaders moving into the civil society space as well, but that's another discussion altogether. What did you think when you heard of this topic, when our producers reached out to you and said, well, the media's portrayal of women in politics, is it something that you've always wanted to perhaps, you wanted to see touched on?
Well, I think it's very interesting, and I think that there's a statistic that less than 20% of women are actually quoted in politics in particular. And there's even an organization called Quote This Woman that is in South Africa that's part of the, I think, independent publishers that basically exists to have women voices. And so women across the different aspects that you're talking about are able to be on this database, and when the media looks for an expert woman on something, they're able to access them because maybe it was an issue of access. And when I heard of this topic, I thought it was really great because having been a woman who was in politics, I think that there was a lack of real delving into what my particular thoughts were, and it was always about particularly, the infighting that maybe women are having within their political parties, or the fact that, I'm being juxtaposed to what a male politician has said. And I think it's interesting. And I think that, to be fair to the media, there hasn't been systemically a lot of women in the media space for a long time until recently who've had the power to also have these conversations, to push them by being the women, even in those newsrooms, that were able to drive it forward. So I think it's a relevant conversation to be having now as we become a society that also accesses news in a lot more different forums too.
Yeah, I think a little bit later on in the discussion, though, we'll talk about the difference between representation, which is, I suppose, the numbers, right, versus what that representation actually is able to do. Because it certainly is one thing to have the numbers, but if they're not speaking the right language, that's another conversation altogether. Yolokazi, I'm going to bring you in here because we sparked this conversation coming out of the ANC Women's League conference last week. We did, of course, invite the president of the ANC Women's League, and unfortunately, she was unable to join us. But coming out of it, I think one of the biggest questions was, do people care about the women's leagues of political parties?
Yes, good morning, Naledi. Well, people do care about the Women's League because its inception was very important for women in South Africa at that particular time. And the Women's League, its role, it's supposed to actually represent women and for them to find a space that is conducive for themselves. But now the Women's League has also, over time, its role has been tainted. We've seen Women's League being used for political clout, being used for as conveyor belts to deliver these men, right? And the conversation that they're having in this Women's League is not as empowering for the women, particularly in the ANC, right? But it's very important that when we look into the challenge that women are facing in the country, we don't only relegate it to women, because we're giving so much responsibility to these women to actually undo the practices that are being done by men. So when you find out when there's issues of patriarchy within the political organizations, when, for instance, people like Mbali, they are just opposed with men and they're also just a pretty girl, that's it. But the content that women have, it's often negated. But these things must be spoken about when it's in a space where there's men as well. Because men need to be sensitized, they need to undo the stuff that they're doing, but also they need to unlearn the toxic behaviors and masculinities that they portray in these political organizations that they're leading. So this conversation is very important, but also the women's leagues are very important to actually introduce the discussion and maybe lead the discussion, but invite the men to actually tell them that this space is for us all and all of us must thrive in it.
I mean, there's something to be said about even coming out of the ANC Women's League that, there's something to be said about even the presence of the ANC leadership and the male voices that were inside the conference. I mean, is that a concern?
Yes, it was. I remember the SG was addressing the Women's League, and he said, "Nimamela madoda," and the way he speaks to them as if like, yes, you are women, you must listen to me, I'm a man, I'm talking. And it was very problematic. You can check the nuances and how, but the room was electric. The women were clapping hands. It's a few women who actually went up and said that these men, they come into our spaces and they command the space as if this is their room, right? But the nature is the nature of politics. I think in South Africa, and globally, the politics are heavily men, and men, they get into the political spaces and assume it's their homes. They assume that the space allows them to actually exercise their patriarchal powers. Hence, now the SG would find no problem to actually come and address a women's conference like that.
And really, this isn't necessarily about what goes on inside political parties. And we can obviously, pinpoint particular parties, and then we'd be here the whole day. But this is about, I think, for me, what the media then does to give a voice to women within those parties. So I'm going to bring Nomshado in here. At Media Monitoring Africa, I know that you spend a lot of time, obviously, looking at the data, right? Analyzing just how women's voices, particularly those in political power, are represented by the media. What are you seeing there, Nomshado?
So just to give a bit of a background, so Media Monitoring Africa has been monitoring elections since 1994, or media in general. And so we've really, started monitoring literally when we stepped into this new democratic era where women are now given the platform to actually push their voices across. And interestingly enough, since then, we're still battling to even come halfway. We're not talking about whose voices are being heard, whose voices are being amplified. I mean, just to give an example, 2021, we're looking at 19% of female voices heard. In 2019, previous elections, we're looking at 20% of voices being heard. And looking at the makeup of women in our country, which is 51%, and knowing very well that there are those female voices within the various parties or within the political landscape to be able to actually give voice to certain issues or to societal issues at that current point. And to see that the trend over the years is, and the improvising for it, the improvising for it, and how we are actually getting to a point of us saying that we're getting there. It's literally in staggered, amounts. We're getting 1% improvement, 2% improvement, 5%, maybe in some cases when we are really looking at, us getting to where we want to be. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done when we're coming to the point. Are we really representing all the voices that are there? Are we really showcasing women's impact within the political ecosystem?
Yeah, okay, Nomshado, let me ask you this though, because I think what you're saying is quite interesting to me, because you're saying, okay, there is the work that we're doing, but the growth is incremental. But here's my thing. Does the viewer, the receiver of media in South Africa, want to hear the voices of female leaders in power? And I'm saying, are we talking here just about, women want to hear women's voices, or just the general public want to hear the voices of female political leaders?
I think I got to highlight on that question the role of the media, right? Yeah. Media is a reflection of our society. And once anyone sits in front and interacts with media, reads media, listens to media, there comes a point where we need to understand what is the fundamental role that media plays in our society. And that is actually giving the true reflection of where we are currently. And if I, as a citizen, I'm hearing more male-dominated voices, my perception would then be, And my influence would then be that these are only the voices that are currently there having impact or being on the ground and showing me where we are as a country or where we do need to be as a country.
Yeah.
So I think it goes back to what gender tropes is media using and how are they actually, working around their mandate and the influence that they have towards our society.
Yeah.
So the need for that voice definitely is there, because reality is we are living in a country where, not even a country, globally it's an issue when you're talking about patriarchy.
Okay.
And now it's 2023, moving to 2024, where we're going to get into a position where women's voices have really been trying to fit and fight through this, division of inequality that has been laid down for them. So I think the need for those voices definitely are there, but also we need to just take a step back and say, how are we reflected as a society through the media lens?
Yeah, but we're going to take some reflective time, if you will, and maybe go back to some interesting political moments for some of you, Mbali, particularly you as well, around when you had really big shifts in your political career and how the media portrayed that. And we'll go back in a moment. For now, then, let's bring in Nonhlanhla Makhuba from the IFP Women's Brigade. Nonhlanhla, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I mean, tell us just firstly how much coverage the IFP Women's Brigade, if at all, gets from the South African media.
Okay. When I received the topic, I was really excited because I thought this is something that we should have spoken about a long time ago. We know that the media plays a very crucial role in shaping public perceptions of politicians. And I just want to say, yes, in the IFP, you spoke earlier on about the quotas of how far the parties are. And I just want to say that the IFP quota is a bit different from the ANC's one, where they just say 50-50. We are saying 40. We want to see, because we are a growing party, we want to see 40 women above 35 in leadership, and we want to see 30% youth. In that 30% youth, of the youth, 10% will be the young women, and then the other remaining 30% will be the adult male. We know that it's going to take the party very long to get there, but we are pushing as women, because what we have realized in this process is that when I was looking at the topic, I said to myself, this topic needs to be, broken down, because it's not only the media that has a responsibility to portray women in the political arena, but even the very political parties that we are in have a role to play in making sure that we grow our young women to get into positions of power that we are in at the moment, so that when we move out, there won't be any vacuum. So what I can say is that as the IFP, we do have the challenges that most political parties do have. We do have issues of patriarchy, but we are dealing with it, because what we are saying as the Women's Brigade is that we can't be the biggest number in the party as women. In the IFP, most members are female. And when we last checked the stats, it was the women that was even above 50% of membership in the IFP. But when you check positions, women that are holding, you don't see the same when it comes to
then why, Makhuba, are you not having these discussions out in the public? And so I don't know if I'm essentially saying that perhaps to some extent the media is to blame for not giving you the platform to do so, but why aren't you taking these discussions up on a public platform?
I fully agree with you that it's something that we have been doing, and we have been doing it internally. It is about time that we actually take it out, so that whoever wants to continue with the old scenario must know that they are not able to do it. Because what I can say right now is that we felt that being a politician involves not only leadership and power, but it also involves exposure of your personal image. So we feel that this is where your media must come in, by amplifying women's personal image and branding them so that they can be well advertised and well known. But that is why then I went in and I said also political parties have to prepare their female reps to engage with the media, making sure that they have the knowledge of the subject matter. Things like your party policies, so that they have enough information to respond to the journalists when asked questions. So, and sometimes this lack of information creates women not to want to respond to journalists because they shy away from media, as they know that they would not want to be embarrassed. So there is a two-way relationship here that has to happen between us as political parties and the media, because the media can't do it on its own, and we cannot, just like it nicely said it now, we cannot do it on our own as just a political party. We need to involve the media in order for the media to actually also assist us by putting all the matters out there in the public for the public to see.
Yeah, you've made such a strong point there. When you've talked about how the media portrays women, and you said even how women are portrayed from a personal point of view, I think there's somewhere to go there, and we're going to go into that a little bit, right? Even how the media tells the personal stories of women in politics, does that differ to how we do so with men in politics? Welcome back. You're still watching Media and Society. Well, in the realm of political reporting, the media wields immense influence, of course, in shaping public opinion and perceptions of various political figures. However, this influence comes with the responsibility to maintain objectivity and fairness. And one critical aspect that warrants, of course, examination is the presence of stereotypes and biases in political reporting, particularly where gender is concerned. While progress has been made in promoting gender equality, subtle biases and deeply ingrained stereotypes do persist in the way the media covers and portrays male and female politicians. We continue the discussion with Yolokazi Mfuto, political analyst and development practitioner. We're also joined by Nomshado Nkosinkulu, who is the head of communications at Media Monitoring Africa. She joins us via Zoom. Still in studio with Mbali Ntuli as well, the CEO and founder of Groundwork Collective and former DA member, Nonhlanhla Makhuba from the IFP Women's Brigade. And in a moment, we'll be speaking to Gugu Xulu Dlamini from the ATM's Women's League as well. And we had also a commitment from Naledi Chirwa from the EFF to join us as well in this discussion. But I did say a little bit earlier, can we reflect a little bit on moments that you've had in your political career? I think one of the standout moments for you, Mbali, would have been when you put your hand up to run for the leadership of the Democratic Alliance. What did you think of the coverage that you had at that time? Because I think the excitement was, wow, she's young, she's female. Was that the right angling for you?
I think that, you know, it was great for the media to cover some of that race and the lead up. But yes, the young, the gender was hurtful, because then it was all that anyone would actually speak about. And I actually was the only candidate that had put together a policy suite of policies that I thought would have been really incredible for the organization at the time. Some were quite bold. And unless there were niche publications who were interested in my, you know, green energy policy or what I was saying about sex workers, for example, then that wasn't really reported on. Instead, the reporting was mainly on the you know, differences that I had with some political principles that were in the party, which is fair enough because that is a part of the story, but it overshadowed actually the content of what was supposed to be discussed about. And I think that that's something that we have in general as a discussion point that we should be having in South Africa. We've made our politicians, to some extent, almost celebrities by only covering kind of the sensational stuff that they do, as opposed to asking them hard questions about what it is that they want to do with the power that they say they want to amass, both male and female. But on the female side, there's an extra burden of then also having to have these silly discussions about whether females are ready to lead. So before you even can have the conversation about what you want to do, you have to first, you know, dismantle the idea that a female can lead, that a young person can lead, that a black person in a party that's even predominantly white can potentially take this party forward. And we haven't even gotten to discussion of the meat of what is actually supposed to happen.
Let's go back there. Were you ever asked about the policy proposals that you put on the table? How often did that conversation happen?
I would say probably about 20% in most of the media interviews. And obviously, as an adept political communicator, you bring it in yourself into the conversation space in any case. But it was never something that was the basis or the main substantive part of what I was being interviewed about, which I think actually hurts females, because then obviously people are going to focus on the questions that the person's asking. So if you're continuously asking me why I'm 32, why do I think I should run? And I keep saying, you know, 70% of the people in this country are me, actually, and would probably feel like they could talk to me better or have me relay some of their issues. But now we're on a whole different tangent as opposed to what is it that I want to actually do. So I think that there is that misrepresentation. But also just going back to some of the discussion you were having with Yolokazi, even that ANC Women's League conference, I don't remember any of what the women said because I only really saw clips of what their SG was saying. And so that also goes back to what the media chooses to put out there. That was a big part of that particular conference. And similarly with business and other places. I mean, we have Vusi Mavuso, she's the head of BLSA. We have Nolisa Fakute, who's the head of Anglo. We have the Wendy Lohabes at Pepco. We have all these incredible business leaders, but we don't hear about them. We hear about the usuals, the Christo Visas, the Koos Beckers, and again, you know, they've been captains of industry for a long time, but now we do have these incredible women and they need the media to help them to have the platforms and the access to say what it is they're doing so that we can see that there are women like that are already in leadership and we can feel that those companies or those organizations might be going towards certain ways. For all I know, you know, at Alexander Forbes, which also has a black female head of it, they have transformative policies on what women can do in the workplace now. We'll never know that because the media doesn't focus on them. And there needs to be a discussion on why that is still happening in this particular age when we've worked so hard as women to try and cross these barriers and these ceilings. Yeah,
I want to hear this, I suppose, the similar or try and get the perspective then of the IFP Women's Brigade, right? Makhuba, Nonhlanhla, of course, Makhuba from the IFP Women's Brigade joining us on the line. I'm going to bring you in here and say, okay, when the media does speak, if at all, to the IFP Women's Brigade, are you still being asked just how much of a voice you have inside the party? Or are you actually asked about what you want to see from a policy shaping point of view?
You know, I will just want to be very open and honest about in a way that I answer your question, because we don't feel as the IFP that we are receiving as a women's brigade enough coverage, you know, to actually portray our women out there. I will make an example why I'm saying that. We have, as much as I said, we have not yet reached our 50%, which is the 40 of the elder women and the 10 from the young women in the party. We have not reached that as yet, but we do have females representing us, like from your parliament, from legislatures, from different councils. We've got mayors, we've got female deputy mayors, speakers and all that. But I cannot sit here today and say we feel that we are getting enough coverage from the media when it comes to the work that these females are doing in such high positions of power.
Yeah, all right, Makhuba. I mean, Yolokazi, I bring you in here again and say, okay, well, I mean, we can sit here and talk about how the media needs to play a role and give women like Makhuba and Mbali Ntuli and others more of a stage on the media platform. But is the reality that even the public does not believe that they have influence within their own parties, and that's why they're not given these platforms?
Well, Naledi, the truth is, society in general, the stories of women are always told in a very negative light of women. We tell the stories in history. Currently, we've seen Ushaka Ilembe. Now people are only, oh, Nandi was such a powerful woman. The way the story of Shaka has been told has been very male-dominated. Shaka was his own person. Meanwhile, there's a number of women who have influenced him, right? Also, the way in which we tell stories, it has to be very important how we position women in society. And also the public, not the public, it's us, it's our societies, and how we see women in our streets, in our homes, in our communities. The manner in which now we are going to relate to women in politics is exactly the manner in which we relate to women in our societies, right? But the one thing that I also want, even South Africa in general, the way we tell our history, when we tell a story of the liberation movement, a number of people that I mentioned, it's men, right? But a number of people who have been very impactful. We see the book that written by Yolokazi Mfuto, the female guerrillas. The number of women who actually participate in the MK, some in Upoto, right? But do we see them paraded on the streets as great people who fought for our liberation, right? So if we are going to now ask people like Mbali or Nonhlanhla on what role are they playing, maybe we are going to also be cornering them. But it's very important now how we also culture, change the culture in our communities on how women are portrayed, then it's going to infiltrate in how we do politics and in how we tell our stories. And also the media. Whose media is it, right?
Yeah.
Who's funding the media? Is it, are women part of the storytelling in media so that they can tell the stories the way they also see themselves as represented? So we also have to question on how the media, who are they serving?
Yeah.
Are they also patriarchal as our societies?
Let me ask you this. Do we, to a certain extent, personalize women too much? And I'll give you an example of that, right? Where we've seen political leaders, and I'm not going to go into particular names, but female political leaders have a sex scandal, for instance. Sometimes it seems as if that's the end of the road for their political career. We don't treat men the same, do we?
Yeah, definitely we don't. So we've seen a number of politicians with sex scandals. They come back and have a good comeback. Even the way the stories are told, right? We see that, oh, he had a scandal and then he's coming back. He must be assisted in coming back. But when women have
some even come back with nicknames.
Definitely. And we laugh about it, right? And also, and we like, oh, okay, at least we've seen, right? People make such jokes. But when a woman has done, there has a similar incident, the whole world is closing up on them. And there's no one to actually stand up for this particular woman and say that that woman is a human being, and they also they must be given the same grace that the man is given. And also equally in terms of corrupt activities. Our politicians we've seen in South Africa, they're very corrupt. But have you seen when a female is found to be corrupt? How the world reacts and how South Africa reacts, because we react differently. We oh, this is the end of the road for them. But when these males are doing the same thing, we are very much okay. They are all like that. We sweep it under the carpet, and maybe again we only not in politics. Maybe to bring in the judiciary now. We've seen how the judiciary, also women in there, and we see the numbers. They are there. Quantitatively, we are good there. But when we even see with the appointment of the Chief Justice, the Deputy Chief Justice, she was very good in the interviews. What happened? Some said, maybe we just needed a man. Imagine such an excuse, right? So this problem, yes, it's there politically, in politics, but also the judiciary, and also in business, as Mbali has made mention of, and also in society and how we tell stories. So it's a confluence of things that we must uproot and be intentional about it, and not only maybe have the discussion when we see the Women's League and the clips that the media put up, but actually be intentional in the groundwork at schools, and be intentional in calling out the media when they're misrepresenting women's views. The conference, we even seen policy discussions there. We saw that just as the clips are playing here, the women celebrating, the SG speaking, but the content was amazing.
Okay, when we come back, what we're going to do is actually focus on calling the media out. And Nomshado, we have not forgotten about you. Nomshado Nkosinkulu, of course, is the head of communications at Media Monitoring Africa. And perhaps when we come back, Nomshado will talk to us about how exactly we hold the media accountable, right? What mechanisms are in place, even just to watch how the media covers various political leaders, and particularly how it represents women in power. Welcome back. You're still watching Media and Society with myself, Naledi Moleo. And as we get into Women's Month, we're having a discussion this morning about how the media covers women in political positions. Would you like to see more female political voices on your television, on your radio? Let us know. Give us a call, in fact, on 011-714-0661. How do you think women in political power are represented? 011-714-0661. I'm going to bring in Nomshado again, who is, of course, the head of communications at Media Monitoring Africa. Nomshado, Yolokazi earlier talked about we need to hold the media accountable. Do we have the mechanisms in place? I mean, we certainly have the mechanisms in place where we say, well, we need this much children's educational content and whatever it may be from ICASA. But do we have the same where we're talking about women's representation, particularly if they are in positions of power?
I think when you're talking accountability, as you mentioned and highlighted, that the mechanisms are there. But I think it also speaks to what initiatives need to happen on top of that. For example, promoting gender equality in newsrooms, having more women making, decisions and giving those diverse perspectives. Media literacy as well. I think one of the guests, they spoke about how women are beyond, their images or beyond their age or their gender. You have policymakers, you have those that are influencing the economy. Educating the public in the importance of actually engaging with that content also helps. And I think one of the elements as well, when it comes to reporting transparently, historically it always used to be an issue of, well, where do we get these voices? How do we access these voices? They're not there. It's actually putting in the effort to say that this is the structure, and look into the structure, investigate the structure, and find those voices that can be amplified and create the environment for them to actually feel comfortable to come forward. Because as mentioned before, that maybe it's the sense of they might take my story and put it in a different framing. So language and framing is also very important. Moving away from, the stereotypical way of engaging with women or focusing on appearance will help immensely. And I'd just like to highlight one thing. I think the thing we're also missing is that how we are now in a digital sphere whereby whatever news agenda there is, it also translates and triples into social media, whereby we also have issues there of harassment, issues of, dis and misinformation around female leaders, and how that can actually even impact the way that they engage on those public platforms, even though they're there to further amplify their voices, because now journalists and media can easily access their views using those type of platforms. And I think it's important to kind of situate and start realizing that there's a larger sphere here, and how is media connecting with this sphere? How is it driving the agenda in this sphere?
Yeah. That's actually a very interesting point there, because I can only imagine just what a female political leader goes through just on the Twitter streets. I mean, are there any trauma stories that you go back to?
Oh, I mean, I think mine are a lot based on what people thought, I should be doing with the specific party I was. So I still get it now, even though I've left the party over a year ago. I mean, I just tweeted the other day about having a bad sort of issue with some transport, and the majority of the harassment I received was still about the politics, and obviously you must be a Karen, you must have deserved it, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I think for me in particular, I've been in politics long enough that I have a very thick skin about that. But she's absolutely right, Nonhlanhla, when she says that the space is more accessible, which means that there is more way to amplify what you want to say as a female leader, but at the same time there's also the kind of harassment, so you're also trying to and be above the sound barrier in that particular way. But I think that it's at least made more of an equality of being able to at least say what you want to say if you want to use that particular platform. So in many ways, for me, it's been a great platform when you couldn't maybe traditionally access media, to at least have the ability to say what it was that you wanted to say and to have it being put out there. And I think that the media then must also think that they are in danger of losing the ability to be the sole voices of representing what people want to say if they're not going to access them. But at least there's other ways now that people can do it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to keep opening up the lines, because I'm really keen to hear just what the South African public is saying about this, right? What is it that you'd like to see the media do to bring you more voices of women in politics? Are we doing that enough? Perhaps you're happy with how we're doing it. Give us a call, 011-714-0661. But one of the things we take very seriously here on Media and Society is, of course, always checking in with the media practitioners of the future, those that will be entering the space in the next few years, and really how they would like to tell stories. And we, of course, checked in with students at the University of Johannesburg's School of Journalism to hear how they would like to see themselves tell the story of women in political power.
As a young female going into the media industry, I think that it is my responsibility to advocate for change and to be part of the change in terms of the representation of women, and also the representation of women in the workspace as well, and obviously opening up space for more women in the industry. This starts with women collaborating and allowing each other to be present in the same space and doing what men can also do.
I think content is not enough to uplift women in the media, but in having women in top positions in the organizations, having enough physical representations might actually help with bringing more representation.
Everyone within the film and television industry or space has a story to tell. And as a scriptwriter myself, as a filmmaker, I believe like it's important for me to represent issues on the grassroots level. Number one, by addressing the inequalities, by addressing all the sexism that is happening within the country. And as a male, if it is done by us, because most of the time the marginalization is done by people who are the opposite gender. So as a male, as someone who's a storyteller, I believe that it lies within upon me, or it lies on me to change the narrative of how women are represented, to change the whole storytelling narrative in South Africa.
As a young person who's going into the media space, I believe that I have a responsibility of providing accurate information and making sure that the public has access to all the information that they should have access to. I believe that the way that stories are told should not be based on gender, but they should be based on partiality and responsibility.
I really want to, enter the media space and actually make a difference, because I have a grandmother who has certain ideas and indoctrinated ideologies about what a woman is supposed to be in society, what a woman's role in society is supposed to be, and obviously that needs to change. We've learned that through our our theory here in academia and all. And I also have a young sister who is growing up in a world that is dominated by ideas about what a female is supposed to be, how they're supposed to carry themselves and all of that. Obviously that needs to be amended and changed. And so I'm looking forward to actually working in the media space and making differences about these ideas and changing the narrative in a way. I hope I'll be able to do that.
Look at that. Those are the voices and the faces of the future of media, and some interesting ideals that they have. And hopefully we'll see that translated in the way they help you shape the way you view the country. We're taking calls, 011-714-0661. Ignatius is calling from our neighboring Lesotho. Ignatius, good morning. Thanks for calling.
Hello.
Hi, Ignatius. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well. What are your thoughts on our discussion?
Yes, so my thought, regarding the media, I think women are not ready now to take over. And I think there still need to be the school whereby women need to be taught how to lead, not to front.
Wait, say that again, Ignatius, please.
Sorry?
Say that again, please.
I can't hear clearly.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you so much for calling. We'll take more calls, 011-714-0661. What do you make of that?
If I heard him correctly, he was saying that women are not ready, and that women should take some time. I think he said to have some more school or something. I think we've been very clear on this panel what we feel about that. And I mean, again, this is a clear case of that. And I mean, I can't understand how he could watch a show like this where we speak about the capacity of women and then still have that particular view. It just shows how long we have to go.
How much work we have to do.
We have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of unlearning to do in our society.
Yeah. We're going to start moving towards wrapping it up. Nomshado, I'm going to bring you in here. Obviously, the call from Ignatius really just shows just how much work we have to do. We showed a little bit earlier, just the mindsets of some of the media practitioners that are coming in. What's your message on this discussion, particularly to media practitioners that are watching, about really how they need to think about the role that they play in shaping the way we view women in power?
I think moving away from our last caller there, what we have in studio or what we have here on this show is a representation of what women can do. And to know that there's still such views, it is obviously showcasing that there's still a long way to go. But what's motivating and inspiring is hearing those young, upcoming practitioners speaking about how on a personal level, they want to influence their societies. And I could only motivate them further to break those barriers and start positioning themselves in a way of, realizing that the power that they have in breaking down, those patriarchies that we're finding ourselves still trying to break down, and also realizing, the importance of our society and empowering them to actually start seeing these issues as, fundamentally important as they are. And I always go back to literacy, so yeah, that would be my last key words.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Nomshado. Yolokazi, I'm going to bring you in and say, okay, we're going into August. A lot of the discussion this month is going to be about, Mum Sophie de Brain, Lillian Ngoyi, and there's nothing wrong with that, because those are women that did a lot for women in South Africa. But how do we take the discussion forward in 2023?
So how we take the discussion forward in 2023, it's very much important that the way we tell the stories of the great women, the great women that we're referring to, also is the people that the media has portrayed to us. But we must also tell the stories of the untold women, that the heroes that actually have died for our liberation in history, for instance. We must be able to reflect on those women. But secondly, let's not hide behind culture and say our culture is influencing us in terms of how we treat women. Our cultures as African people have never been about subjugating women and also mistreating women. It's very important that we check our behaviors in our societies and how also we react to Twitter when we see women being bashed, just those small things. Then you can speak about the politics. You can speak about how women are treated in politics. But let's check the day-to-day behaviors on how we treat women in South Africa and how we treat women in the continent. Now we only speak about Seliv, who has led a country in the continent. Do we give enough media attention to the female leader in Tanzania, for instance? We don't speak about those, but it's very important now that we have these discussions and must not tire in having these discussions. Let's not get tired and say, let's not talk about these things, because we have these kind of callers that are going to say women can lead, they must have a particular school. And those ideals are not only about Ignatius, the societal problem. And many people harbor those poisonous ideas that women cannot lead, and yet they stay with women, they see women working hard each and every day. So we must be able to provide space for men to unlearn, and also provide space for men to actually say these things and correct them on the spot, and not be as kind and also like cushion their behaviors. Thank you so much, Nalini.
No, an absolute pleasure. Mbali, last bite from you. Your call to the media particularly.
I think for me really is to focus less on the personalities of the politicians in our country and really get into the substance of what it is that they stand for. And I say this equally for all politicians, but particularly for women, because we even have a female leader of a party that's in parliament right now. I haven't seen anything on the media on her in the last 2 years, aside from her work as a minister. So the media itself also needs to do a lot of work of getting over the habit of the sensationalism and the journalism that's very quick and easy and based on Twitter clicks and baits, and really push these politicians on what it is that they stand for, because then you'll start to get people being able to express themselves, and we'll see the quality of leadership that we want to see coming out.
We did reach out to ATM, IFP, EFF, ANC. A lot of these women could not and were unable to join us, and I think there's a lot of questions around why that happened. But we do still have with us Nonhlanhla Makhuba from the IFP Women's Brigade. Mama, what would you like to see more from the media? Your call to the media as we wrap up.
Thank you very much. I would want to just say this before I do my closing remarks. I just want to say it clearly shows as women that we still have a long way to go. The last statement that was done here by one of our callers actually proves that it is true that women are regarded as politicians that are weak, indecisive and emotional, and it's really hurting. It shows that we still have a lot of work to do. We need to work towards a balanced society in where both men and women enjoy the same opportunities. I think journalists could assist us by playing a crucial role in raising public awareness on the need for gender equality and empowerment of women. I also feel that media houses also need to ensure that women's voices are heard. Voices of women, even those who are not in senior positions.
Mama,
And,
that's all the
finally-
time we have. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And I think one of the things that we hope has come out of it is that the media has seen a role that they have to play as well in shaping the way that the country sees women in power. Thank you so much to our guests, and thank you so much for joining us as well. We're back with you again next week Sunday. Have yourselves a wonderful afternoon.